Tonight, a heatwave warning. Scotland is set to sizzle, but there's real concern we're seeing worryingly hot weather.
Even fully healthy people are at serious risk due to that heat.
Also making the headlines, the trains are back on track. ScotRail say they'll return to a normal timetable from next week. In sport, Tiger's tears as he fails to make the cut at the Open. Is this his final farewell to the home of golf?
The song that I sing is a song of the Clyde.
And we're doing the water at the start of the fair fortnight.
I'm Gordon Cree in Edinburgh.
And I'm Emma Cameron in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6.
Good evening. Summer has finally arrived, but as the country heats up, there's a warning. Temperatures are set to soar over the days ahead, with the Met Office releasing an amber alert for heat in Scotland. In England, that alert is red, indicating they expect exceptional heat.
Yes, forecasters predict for the first time there's a realistic possibility of hitting 40 degrees in the UK, a potential indicator of the climate crisis. As the mercury rises, people and businesses are preparing for the hot weather to come, as Laura Piper reports.
Keeping cool as the mercury rises. At this care home in Edinburgh, staff are on standby to help protect their residents from the heat.
They're lovely, aren't they? I prefer the chocolate ones, but that's quite nice, the strawberry one.
Yeah, ice creams, sausages.
Obviously, it's not something that we're used to in this country, so a lot of places, a lot of the buildings aren't really set up for high temperatures. Luckily, we've got some air conditioning in our houses, so that obviously helps. For us, it's just encouraging fluids, making sure that they've maybe got a sun hat, sun cream on, having cold drinks available, ice creams, residents like slushies, they go down a treat.
The inescapable truth is that heat waves are happening more often and becoming hotter, leading to wide-reaching impacts on our health and on the environment. Farmers are on the front line of our changing climate.
So believe it or not, 16 degrees is about perfect, 16 to 20 degrees for dairy cows. Above 20 degrees, cows can start to struggle with heat stress. We've even put in a sprinkling system as they come into the milking parlour, so just a little spray of water as they walk into the milking parlour to help cool them down. You manage it the best you can. In the UK as a whole, I think we've had the 7 hottest days out of 10 in the last 20 years. That proves climate change. For farms like these, water is vital. But today, SEPA announced that 11 more areas in Scotland are at an increased risk of water scarcity. The Dee, Firth of Forth and Armagh catchment areas have been raised to moderate scarcity, and the Clyde catchment is now at alert. If the water scarcity risk level reaches significant, then SEPA will consider whether restrictions will be required to protect the water environment. Scientists are clear that human-caused global heating is making every heatwave more intense and more likely.
Fully healthy people are at serious risk due to that heat. But there's also transportation is affected. For example, trains can't run.
By Tuesday, hot air from mainland Europe will boost temperatures to the upper 20s in central Scotland, touching 30 degrees in the Scottish borders. And people are already finding ways to cool down.
Just get ice cream. I'm not planning anything else.
The best way of cooling down is probably having ice cream.
Just like drink lots of water probably. Obviously have ice cream and ice lollies and keep the fan on, I guess.
As global warming continues to cause meltingly high temperatures, keeping people cool and safe will have to remain a priority. Laura Piper, STV News.
And Sean will have a full weather forecast later in the programme. Now, we began the week with news that the pay dispute between ScotRail and its drivers had been resolved, and we ended with the train operator announcing a return to its normal timetable.
A full set of scheduled services will resume on Wednesday of next week. Vanessa Kennedy has been taking a look at the details for us. Vanessa.
Well, Edinburgh's already busy with tourists, and with the festival coming up in just a couple of weeks, it's set to get even busier. So the announcement that the temporary timetables will be coming to an end will be welcome news to the hundreds of thousands of people who rely on the train services. Now, earlier this week, when the pay offer from ScotRail was accepted by train drivers, the company said that it would aim to get things back on track as fast as possible. Now we know that will be Wednesday. And the reduced service was brought in because drivers were refusing to work overtime on rest days and on Sundays, but as part of the pay deal, there are now new payments for doing that. ScotRail is currently in a major recruitment drive. They're trying to bring in more than 100 extra drivers, but that won't be in place until next year. But for now, it's good news for rail passengers, especially those who've had to deal with a lot of disruption over the last few weeks.
There's a bit more opportunity for getting to and from places, because I'm having to get a train quite soon just because I need to go back to work in Edinburgh coming from that, and had the trains been any more disrupted than this, it would have been quite a bit of a problem.
When you might want to meet your colleagues after work, then you actually have that option again. You don't have to say at 7 o'clock, sorry guys, I'm going to have to leave when the fun really just starts.
From Wednesday there'll be an extra 700 services a day. That will take us back to the timetable that we had at the beginning of May before the dispute. We would ask customers check their journey before they travel, visit the website, look at the app, just to make sure that they familiarise themselves with the timetable.
Now, it's not the end of the rail disruption, though, because the RMT union have announced further planned strikes this summer. Members across the UK will walk out on the 27th of July, as well as the 18th and the 20th of August. Now, that's over a new dispute over jobs, pay and conditions between the RMT and Network Rail. Now, their strikes crippled parts of the service across Scotland, across the Central Belt, just last month, with only a handful of services running, and it meant that a lot of people were simply cut off. Now, ScotRail say that they're still assessing the potential impact that could have here in Scotland, but they do say it's likely it will have a similar impact to what it did in June.
So still worth checking before you travel. Vanessa, thank you. The number of people with COVID in Scotland has risen for the 6th week in a row. 1 in 16 people had the virus in the last week, with rates higher here than any other part of the UK. Leading virologists say a rise in cases isn't necessarily dangerous, though.
Campaigners for immunosuppressed people say they're now facing a new form of inequality and exclusion. Although it's been confirmed today, all over 50s are to get another booster vaccine. Here's our political reporter, Laura Alderman.
For the last 2.5 years, this is where Sally has spent most of her time. Despite being in a high-risk category, the academic hasn't been eligible for COVID boosters or antiviral treatments.
At the moment, the likes of me are stuck. We're just totally stuck. I cannot safely go out. My GP has confirmed if I get COVID, I can expect a poor outcome. There are drugs around like Evusheld for people who are immunosuppressed. Well, but unfortunately, they've been approved, but they're not around. No one can get them, and nobody really knows why. These are people who don't respond to vaccines.
Sally says many people like her are now being excluded from daily life.
The numbers of times I've been invited to speak at events or chair them with the expectation I will show up in person. And then when I explain I can't because it isn't safe, I'm somehow disinvited. That's pretty hard to deal with. That is a new form of exclusion that a lot of people are experiencing now. This is not about trying to stop people getting on with their lives. That's the last thing. It's about people getting on with their lives in ways that are safe.
This afternoon, the JCVI recommended all over 50s should get another COVID booster vaccine in the autumn. Coronavirus cases have risen in Scotland for the 6th week in a row, with 1 in 16 people having the virus.
So it looks like the case numbers and the hospitalisations are levelling off, and we do see with each epidemic wave we've seen that the deaths are peaking around 3 to 6 weeks after the peak of the epidemic wave, and so we do still expect deaths to be increasing at that point. It's likely that they're going to either increase for 1 week maximum or start to go down from now. As we do circulate more in the community, we're going to see case numbers rise, but that's not necessarily dangerous.
In 2 weeks' time, Edinburgh's festivals will return at full capacity for the first time since 2019. It's another sign that while most of us are back to living a normal life, some continue to face a very different world. Laura Alderman, STV News, Edinburgh.
The 5 remaining candidates for the leadership of the Conservative Party are preparing to go head-to-head in their first televised debate of the campaign. In just over an hour, they will set out why they think they should be the next Prime Minister.
Earlier, the candidates took part in an online hustings. MPs will continue the process of reducing the list to 2 next week before party members make the final decision. Our political correspondent Ewan Petrie reports.
Television debates can make or break campaigns. This evening, the 5 remaining candidates for the Conservative Party leadership will face interrogation on Channel 4.
One of them will be leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister.
Earlier, they faced questions on honesty, the cost of living and tax in an online hustings.
I'm a Prime Minister that could hit the ground running with a clear plan about how we deliver.
We need to defeat Starmer, Sturgeon and Davey. And we can do it.
We need to be honest with the British people about the challenges that lie ahead. I'm the right person to do that.
I lead with women, with young people, and I also have the best reach in Scotland.
You know that I will bring honesty, seriousness and competence to government.
Once MPs have whittled down the field to 2, the next Prime Minister will be decided by Conservative Party members across the UK.
They need to tackle the issues, get away from the sort of, scandal after scandal kind of thing that's happened over the past few years. Focus on exactly what they want to show that vision, stand up to the SNP, focus and say we don't want a second referendum, actually this is the issues we want to focus on, tackling the cost of living, making sure that Brexit works, all this sort of thing. I think that if they just get a candidate who wins and who just focuses on the day job, I think that's what people in Scotland want.
Whoever wins, will they be an easier sell on the doorsteps here in Scotland than Boris Johnson, do you think?
I think it's really with the calibre of the candidates at the moment, it will be. Let's join everyone and rebuild our country and tackle the challenges that you and me are facing at the present moment.
Visiting the Open at St Andrews, the First Minister said whoever wins, her target remains an independent referendum next year.
We disagree on independence. People across Scotland disagree on independence. But the way to determine that issue is through democracy. So if there is a new Prime Minister willing to do the democratic thing, I'll be part of that discussion. But I'm not going to sit around and wait for that. I'm going to get on with offering people in Scotland the route to democracy with or without a Tory Prime Minister playing ball.
The candidates go head-to-head again on STV on Sunday evening. The following day, MPs vote in round 3 to narrow the search for their next leader and the UK's Prime Minister.
Well, Ewan, what can we expect from these TV debates over the weekend?
Well, these debates carry the potential for both high risk and high reward. High risk for those currently in the lead. In this case, Rishi Sunak, you'll be hoping a spelling error behind him at that online event is the only hiccup that he encounters. But for those further back in the race, it creates the potential to make an impression, even to strengthen their position and their chances to reach those final 2. And we did get a flavour of what to expect this afternoon with that online event. There were promises of tax cuts, of tackling inflation and the cost of living crisis, as well as, it has to be said, some fairly excruciating responses to the classic interview question of what their biggest weaknesses are. We should know the final 2 by Wednesday next week.
OK, Ewan, many thanks for that. And as Ewan mentioned, you can watch a live Conservative leadership candidates debate this Sunday at 7 o'clock here on STV.
Now to other stories across Scotland this Friday. The Supreme Court has refused an application by the son of the Lockerbie bomber to have his conviction overturned. The family of Abd al-Basit Ali Mohammed al-Megrahi continued to protest his innocence over the terrorist attack in 1988. Megrahi died 10 years ago after being released on compassionate grounds.
One of CalMac's long-delayed ferries has moved a step closer to completion. The Glen Sannox made the short trip to dry dock in Greenock with hopes it will be ready for service by May next year. It's one of 2 vessels being built at Ferguson's, now 5 years late and more than 2.5 times over budget.
One of Glasgow's best-known restaurants has been sold to the pub company Green King. The ubiquitous chip has been family-run since 1971 and has welcomed A-list celebrities to its tables. A spokesman said all 145 jobs were safe in the sale.
Campaigners say they hope the tide is now turning towards an official government apology for all those affected by forced adoption practices. A new report has echoed their calls to right the wrongs experienced by unmarried mothers between the 1950s and 70s.
The findings of the Joint Committee on Human Rights places ultimate responsibility with governments and says thousands were subjected to cruelty and abuse and railroaded into unwanted adoptions. Those who made submissions to the inquiry from Scotland want wider reforms to heal decades of pain. Here's our chief reporter, Sharon Frew.
Their campaign for an official apology has been gaining momentum as more women speak out about a lifetime of shame, trauma and secrets.
You believe you're the only person that this happens to, that you have to just get on with it. Told to pack my bags and go, not knowing that I was never seeing my son again.
This group, all affected by forced adoption, shared their experiences with STV News earlier this year. Together they made a submission to this inquiry by the Joint Committee on Human Rights.
The fact that there is now a vindication of the view that our human rights were violated, that notion of that being fundamentally wrong, is an enormous victory for everyone, for all of us, and that's empowering to us because we have for decades heard the opposite. You weren't worthy to parent.
In 1979, Jano was 22. She was separated from her baby shortly after his birth.
The traumatising day for me was the next day when the social worker came and made it clear that my son had been taken and I wasn't ever going to get him back. You know, and I could go to the nursery with him and say goodbye to him, but I just refused to give her the satisfaction. I think in my head thought, as soon as you're gone, I'm going to be down there in the nursery to get him. But they moved me to a different hospital and I couldn't.
Today's report says it's now time for an official government apology for the pain and suffering caused by public institutions and state employees that railroaded mothers into unwanted adoptions.
I think having had to live with shame and secrecy, it's so important for the government to say, you were wronged, you were vilified, but you need to be vindicated.
This Parliament, on behalf of the Australian people, takes responsibility and apologises.
It's almost 10 years since Australia's government took this landmark step. UK ministers say they are carefully considering today's findings. The Scottish Government set up its own questionnaire to gather the views of those affected. The responses are still being analysed. Scotland's Children's Minister says the process of establishing specialist and peer support has started, and other ways are being explored to best help those who have been affected by this heartbreaking issue.
When people say the government didn't do this to you, parents and society did this to you, the only people who can apologise for society are governments. And I think this event will be, in future times, that I think that was that very good day. The tide is turning on acknowledgement of what happened.
Sharon Frew, STV News.
It's the Glasgow Fair Fortnight, traditionally a time when Glaswegians left the city in their droves for a well-earned break down the water. Factories, shipyards and shops shut for 2 weeks, and although it's no longer a traditional time off for everyone, some are still keeping its spirit alive, as Vanessa Taff reports.
I'll sing of a river I'm happy beside. The song that I sing is a song of the Clyde.
Whether it was a family trip down the Clyde coast, a bus journey to Blackpool, or jetting off to hotter climes, Glaswegians have always made the most of the Fair Fortnight.
Oh, absolutely, to the Clyde coast. Yep, used to go with my first treat was always a single nugget. My dad always got me that for Fair Friday, so that was wonderful, but changed times now.
Going to Turkey?
Yeah.
Going to a place, Bellick, in Turkey?
Yeah. And it's at a water park and we're going to have lots of fun.
Do you celebrate the Glasgow Fair every year? You take the 2 weeks off?
Yes.
And what are your memories of it growing up?
Going to Rossi and getting drunk.
But we don't really bother with the fair holidays. We usually are working, so you don't have it the same as what it was years ago where people took time off.
It's the first summer of travel without COVID restrictions, but for many passengers it's been a frustrating combination of delays, cancelled flights and long queues at airports up and down the country.
Operators like British Airways have already cancelled numerous flights this summer. Further disruption is expected next week again as Ryanair staff in Spain are set to strike. But by the seashores, people are enjoying the sunshine here at home.
Beautiful, yeah. Wonderful. Look at the scenery down here. Fantastic.
Fair Fortnight, 67 years ago I got married. And out of that I got a son.
It's lovely. Oceans there. Views.
The Costa del Clyde always delivers. Vanessa Taff, STV News, along the Clyde.
Seems to know that they are on their homeward way to hear the song of the Clyde.
Well, Ronnie's here with big news for the Open.
Yes.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Yes, good evening. Thanks for the memories. That was the message from Tiger Woods after he made a tearful and likely final appearance at the St Andrews Open Championship. The 24-time major winner wasn't at his best and missed the cut, but still received a rousing ovation from the thousands of fans who lined the course. At the top of the leaderboard, Australian Cameron Smith currently holds a 3-shot lead on 13 under par. Stephanie Daly reports from the Old Course.
I'm not one who gets very teary-eyed very often about anything. You could feel the warmth and you could feel the people from both sides. It felt like the whole tournament was right there. And they all had appreciated what I had done here for the years I played. I've won 2 championships here. My British Open success and all my times I've enjoyed here in Scotland and playing. I felt like it just all came to a head right there as I was, walking to my my golf ball.
The crowds were certainly behind Scotland's David Law, who was making his Open debut.
It's been brilliant. It's been really fun. I've never played a tournament, at this magnitude before. So to have everyone shout my name when I get on a tee and when I'm walking on a green, it's pretty surreal, to be honest. So yeah, I was nervous yesterday playing the first couple of holes and settled into it reasonably well. And today was, I was more about just going out there and having a good round of golf.
I was expecting, but I felt it. I felt the emotions. Got a little mildly choked up, but all the way around the last 2 days, the fans were great. They were cheering for me and pulling for me, and aware that this was my last Open, so that was pretty cool. Yeah. And it means a lot. It really does.
Well, here in the Open Media Centre, the eyes of the world's sporting media are rarely away from the action, and they're all looking for the answer to one question: who will be paraded here as the 150th Open champion? Well, we'll find out on Sunday. Stephanie Daly, STV News, St Andrews.
Football, and Anthony Ralston says Celtic fans should be excited for what's to come ahead of the new season. The right back put in some stellar performances as Ange Postecoglou's men clinched the title last time out, and says they're looking to be even better in the campaign ahead.
We've done what we've done last season. We've hit, good heights, but it's important that we improve again, and that's, as a collective that we're going to aim to do. Is we're going to, we're, like we said, we're in a good place. We've had good training under our belts, good games. But going into the season, we're wanting to, not only do what we done last season, but also improve on it.
Meanwhile, Celtic have spoken to St Mirren youngster Dylan Reid about a move to Parkhead, but Buddy's boss Stephen Robinson says he's better staying put. Robinson confirmed the Scottish champions have met the club's valuation of the 17-year-old midfielder, but says Paisley is the best place for his development.
Celtic have had conversations with Dylan. I've had conversations with himself and his parents. We want Dylan to stay. We think it's the best place for him to develop, which has been proved. I'll throw young players in, and we have done. And then, the boys got a decision to make, and we don't want to put any more pressure on a young kid.
Glasgow Warriors have signed Scotland and Lions prop Alan Dell as he makes the switch from London Irish. Meanwhile, as Xander Fagerson gets set for his 50th Scotland cap, he says the squad have dealt with adversity in Argentina and can lay the foundations for next season by winning the Test Series.
Having a bit of adversity that first game, we didn't really play anywhere near where we wanted to be, and then bouncing back. I think in the years gone by, we had a big performance, and then the week after, maybe slipped up a little bit. So looking to right those wrongs this weekend, and if we can get 2 results in a row over here, it's a good start for building on for the next 18 months.
That's all your sport. I'll see you again on Monday.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sports, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Well, we've already heard concerns about the weather as things start to heat up here, but Sean's here now with all the details of what's in store.
Well, it's going to be a pretty decent weekend for many in the south and east of the country. Always a bit more cloud in the north and northwest. So good over the next couple of days for the Open. Just at a small risk of the odd shower. Temperatures rising to around 24, possibly 25 on Sunday. And we now have an amber heatwave warning out for southern parts of the country. But how high will the temperatures get for you next week? Let's look at the forecast.
The outlook for the day is calm and settled. TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
So that amber heatwave warning out, covering parts of Dumfries and Galway, the borders, and also just nudging into South Lanarkshire for the start of next week. Now, it is funny to think that it's going to be so hot at the beginning of next week with temperatures like this. By night at the moment, temperatures into single figures in some spots as low as maybe 6 degrees, parts of Lanarkshire, Stirlingshire, and also across the Highlands. But for most of us, dry, fine, sunny end to the day, clear through tonight. More cloud coming into the lights of Col, Tiree, Mull, the Small Isle Skye, and also around Lochaber through the night tomorrow morning. So some shout outbreaks of rain coming in here. We'll see more cloud coming into the Inner Hebrides through the afternoon, with some outbreaks of rain coming in further south and east. We hang on to the brighter skies until later on the day. Highs 20 to 22 degrees, just slowly starting to nudge up. Probably around 24, maybe 25 at a push on Sunday across many central and southern areas. A lot of dry and bright weather. We always hang on to more cloud in the north and the west, really throughout the forecast. But on Monday, that's when the temperatures really start to get going. Widely expect across the mainland, away from the coasts, about the mid-20s to the high 20s. Probably the heat peaking Tuesday, and then the heat wave will be gone as quick as it arrived. We'll probably be back to the high teens by the time we get to Wednesday. This is the area of interest at the moment for me, around 31, 32. I've even popped the odd 33 in parts of Dumfries and Galway, and also the borders. Now, bearing in mind the record back in 2003, the Scottish record, 33 degrees. So we could get very close to that. Across Ayrshire, expect temperatures probably peaking around the high 20s on Tuesday. So an absolute scorcher to start next week. Bye-bye.
TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
Factor 70 at the ready. Summer holidays start here for me, but Emma's working again in half an hour.
I am. What's on Scotland at 7? Don't miss it from all of us here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.